Okay, cool. Okay, so we all need Node, and I think that's it. And a text editor like Sublime or Atom. So does anyone here not have Node.js installed? Okay, we're good on that. Everyone have a text editor, Atom or Sublime? All right, cool. So we can just get started. So it's going to be a very, very basic chat room, and that's it. So you're gonna log on to the page. And everyone who's on the page, which is going to be all of us in this room, is going to be able to chat with one another, basically like our own private Slack channel, without any like media upload or things like that. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. So open up your terminal, and let's see. First thing we want to do is make a new go to your desktop. Excuse me. Make a new directory. Let's call it chat room. CD into that directory. Let's spell it right. Let's create a new node project using npm init, and then let's do -y for using all the defaults, so we don't have to enter all those questions individually. So here we created our package.json. That's the beginning of our node project, and then let's go ahead and do some npm install. So we're going to install all the packages we need just to run a very basic React project. So let's go ahead and do that. So npm install as React, obviously React to get started. Okay, after that, npm install React DOM. And then npm install webpack. I'm going to put that in the dev dependencies, excuse me, so it should be capital D, like that.
What's the difference between -s and -d?
So in the package.json, you can save your dependencies in what's called the dependencies, and then you can also save them in what's called dev dependencies. The distinction is that the dev dependencies, those modules, they don't go up to the server, whereas the regular dependencies do. So when you save in a regular dependency, like we did over here, when we deploy to the server, which we're not going to do today, so technically today we didn't need to do any of that, but I'm just being thorough. If we deploy this to a server, the regular dependencies get installed on the server, but the dev dependencies are ignored, meaning we only use the dev tools on local for our development environment. So we did webpack, right? So the next one is npm install Babel 4. And then npm install Babel loader. Babel, if you don't know, is what's called a transpiler. So the JavaScript we're going to write is going to be in ES6 as well as what's called JSX, neither of which is valid JavaScript. So this has to be transpiled into valid JavaScript so that all browsers can read it. So Babel is a tool that does that for us. Okay. Loader npm install Babel preset React. And last but not least, I always do this one last because it takes the longest, so Babel preset ES 2015. This is the ES6 transpiler that transpiles our ES6 code into ES5 so that all browsers can read it. So go ahead and install that. That usually takes about 3 minutes. So while that's going, I'll explain what we've just done. So we've created a node project. We've installed just the bare minimum modules required to run a React project. This project will not have a server involved. It will be just pure front end and that's it. But we are going to connect to Firebase for back end functionality, quote unquote. So the Firebase will be our sort of our database source for us. Who here has never heard of Firebase? Okay, so Firebase is it's like a database service that's run by Google that where anytime you make a change to the database, everyone else who's connected to that database will hear that change. Okay, so changes are propagated to all connected clients instantly. It's like that's what supports real-time chat. Okay, so Firebase is a service that does that for us. We're going to use that today. It is free up to a certain level, so I think it's like 100 connected clients, something like that. And then beyond that, you have to pay whatever monthly fee they charge. Okay, so this means it's done. So when you guys see that, you're ready to go. Is everyone ready to go? Did everyone see this? Okay, so if not, just give it another couple seconds. It should show up soon. And then, let's see here. First thing we need to do is create a couple files. So first thing we're going to create is called the webpack config file. Now webpack is what runs the transpile scripts as well as other scripts. So webpack is sort of a task runner. So we set up these tasks to transpile our code, and then webpack is what actually executes that code. Okay? And those instructions have to be in what's called a webpack config file. So we create a webpack config file. Touch means create. Config.js. Like that. Okay. So we'll configure that in a few seconds, but the next thing we're going to do is create our actual front end, our actual page, or index.html. So go ahead and create that. So that's going to be our actual HTML document. That's where we're going to literally view our results. Okay? Inside there, make a new directory called source, src. Okay, cd into that, and create a new file called app.js. This is going to be our entry point. This is going to be where our React code is written. Okay, this is the most important file so far. That's where we're going to write our React code. So go ahead and create that. And for now, we're good. Open up your directory, and it should look like this, like that. Okay, if you don't see that, it's not going to work. So make sure you see exactly this. Otherwise, things are going to break down. Okay, if you don't have that, raise your hand, and we'll go around and fix it. Okay, so again, real quick, I'll just go through. So the index.html is literally the front end. That's the HTML file where we're going to see our code, the user interface. Node modules, these are the packages we installed. These are the first things we installed, the node modules. Package.json is like your project manifest. That's where all your dependencies are declared, as well as any kind of configuration options like names, description, things like that. Source is where we're going to write. This is going to be where our React code is actually written. And webpack config is where we set up the webpack instructions, which is what we're going to do right now. Okay? So does everyone have this? So normally what I do is I teach people how to write the webpack config from scratch, but today I'm not going to do that because it's basically a template file and a lot of people just get lost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point you to a webpack config file that I use in my GitHub repo, which is open. So okay, so go to my GitHub repo, which is GitHub velocity-360. Excuse me, or the company repo. Let's see, let's use this guy right here, bookmark. This is a project we did in my last Node React class. I'll show you at the end of this session what that project is. It's actually pretty neat. And then scroll down here to where it says webpack.config.js. Click on that. And then click on this button right here where it says raw. So you should be seeing that. So just highlight and copy and paste that into your webpack config. Just literally copy and paste it in. Like so. However, we do have to make a few changes, okay? So you see where it says line 6, app, right here. We want to get rid of the public part, get rid of that. Okay. Change this to src and make that a lowercase a. like that. It should look, line 6 should look exactly like that. Okay, make sure otherwise it's not going to work. So make sure your line 6 looks precisely like mine. Next, line 9, get rid of that public prefix right here, like that. And same thing on line 10, like that. And that's pretty much it. Our Webpack config is ready to go. Let me explain real quick what this is doing. So remember I said a few minutes ago how our React code is not valid JavaScript. We're writing in ES6, which is not valid JavaScript right now. Well, it is valid JavaScript, but not all browsers can read ES6. But equally important, we're using JSX, which is certainly not valid JavaScript. So what has to happen is we have to take all that code and literally rewrite it, transpile it into valid JavaScript, which is called ES5. Every browser can read ES5. That's the most universal JavaScript. So we have to provide the instructions in order to do so. So Webpack is doing that. Webpack is like an instruction manual. It's saying, line 6 is saying, go to this file where you will find the React code. Start here. That's why it's called entry. Start here. Take all that code and transpile it and put the results right here. That's called the bundle. Okay? So that's how you want to read this. So basically, lines 6 and 9 are like the only really important lines. Everything else is where we tell the transpiler what transpilers to use, what loaders to use. So here we're saying use Babel right there with these presets, and this line doesn't even really matter, to be honest. But the bottom line is here. This whole bottom half you'll pretty much never change because everyone uses Babel. They used to use what's called the JSX transformer, but they moved away from that, and now they're using Babel. So this is the industry standard. So in other words, you can consider the bottom half like template code. That's why I said don't worry about writing all this. You're going to just use the same thing every time anyway. However, what does matter, very much so, are lines 6 and 9 and 10. Okay, so this will be configured as per your project. And that's why we changed it today. Okay, so that's how you want to read this. So let's go ahead and start using it. So next thing we're going to do is go into the src directory and double click the app.js. And here's where we're going to start our React code. Okay, that's our entry point. That's where our React code begins. Let's go ahead and start writing some React. So import React component. So right now we're writing in ES6. So right off the bat, our transpiler has some work to do. React DOM. Document get element by ID. This is the React. Okay, so right off the bat, quite a lot going on here. So here, lines 1 and 2, we're importing our modules, the modules we need for this component. React, if you don't know, is what's called a component-based architecture. What that means is that in React, what you do is you design a series of visual blocks, which we call components, small pieces. You can think of them as Lego pieces. And in your code, you push the Lego pieces together. You bring them together to create your page. Okay, and so you can think of a component, which is what we're defining in line 4. We're defining a whole new component called app. That's like a visual building block, where we decide what actually visually shows up inside that block, which is what we're doing in lines 7, 8, and 9. Okay, and we write that in regular HTML, or it appears like regular HTML, but it's not. This is called JSX. Okay, so this is not HTML or JavaScript, it's called JSX. which means that we can't run this in the browser again. I know I'm belaboring that point, but this is very important to understand. This can't run in the browser, so it has to be transpiled, okay? And so here we're defining a visual building block that's going to be this very simple div tag, but when we use it, it's going to be called app. And you can think of a component as like your custom HTML tag, which is exactly what we're doing here. We're using our custom HTML tag right here. You see that? And then that's how we use our React components in React code. We just put together our components as if they were HTML. And then we just bring them together to create our React project. So if you look at my website again, what you're looking at, and any React project, but mine is just the easiest to get to. What you're looking at is a series of components. You're probably looking at about 5 or 6 components right now that I just put together to make this page. Okay? So what we just did right now is we created our first component. Okay? So that's the thinking behind that. All right, cool. So that's enough of that. So now what we want to do is we want to go back to our go to our index.html and create a sort of a canvas upon which we can actually show our React code. Like our React code has to show up somewhere. That's going to be inside the index.html. Okay. So here we just write some raw HTML. So I think I said in the meetup description that this is not really best for total beginners. So if you're a total, I'm assuming some knowledge here, like you know how HTML documents set up, things like that. But if you're a total beginner, let me know, and I'll do some explanation. But I'm just assuming some basic development knowledge here. Okay, so here's where our React code is going to show up. Now let me explain how to read this. Our HTML consists of just one tag, essentially, the div tag. But notice how it has an ID called app, right? What React does is it finds the what's called the root div, and it takes over that part of the page. So we have to tell it where it's going to be, and we're saying the ID is app. Find that guy and take over that code. So React will inject all of its code in that div. So although it's one small div with nothing inside, eventually this is going to show a lot of stuff. That's how React does its thing. Okay, and we determine that inside the component down here, right there. You see that? Get element ID app. That last word right there, app, has to match the div tag that we declared in the HTML, and that's where the code will mount. That's called mounting. Okay, everyone with me? So now our setup is ready to go. So what we want to do is go back to our terminal, cd one level up to the root directory. Make sure you're in the root directory. Okay, create a new tab, or open a new tab, excuse me, doing Command T, and type the following: webpack-w, like that. And let it run. This usually takes about 10-15 seconds. And if it works, you should see a couple green lines pop up. If it doesn't work, you'll see some red stuff pop up. That means it worked.
Probably Webpack is not being correctly installed for me. It says command not found.
Oh, I'm sorry. Good point. Yeah, I forgot. That's my fault. We also have to install Webpack globally. So what I forgot to do is sudo npm install -g webpack. So go ahead and do that. The reason I didn't do it is because I already have it. But if you don't have it, then you don't see that message. So when you do this, it's going to ask for your password. Go ahead and put it in and install the Webpack globally. And then when you do that, try it again and tell me if you see those green lines. Okay, if you see this, that means it worked. But more importantly, you should see this right here. There's a new directory called build, which we didn't write. Webpack did that for us. So what that means is if you open that up, you'll see two files, bundle and bundle.map. Those are the output files that we declared in the Webpack config. We told Webpack to do this in the config file. Does that make sense? This is the most important thing to understand is that right here, the bundle.js, that's where our code is actually going to run. Okay? So our code actually runs here, not here. Okay? That means every time we make changes, we have to recompile. We just compiled the code. We got to recompile it to create a new bundle, to update the bundle. Okay? So now let's actually run the code by going back to index. And we import the bundle as a JavaScript file. Okay, so right here in line 9, I'm importing the bundle file, which will execute our React code. Okay, so now if you go back to your project directory, yep.
Can you go back to the app.js?
Sure.
Because it says unexpected token.
Yep, it'll usually give you a line number. So here, let me induce an intentional error, which I'm about to do. Here, I'm inducing an intentional error. So here, this is where you see,
I see.
on syntax error, unterminated JSX, line 16.
I think I use a bracket instead of
Right. So here, things like this. This is an opportune time to understand how to read these error messages because you're going to see a ton of this. So you may as well just get used to this. So everyone here is going to make mistakes, including me, right? So you want to make sure you understand how to read these error messages. So I made a mistake, quote unquote. It's saying error in that file. So it's telling me literally which file, which is great. And then it says your line number is right here, line 16. Now the file is 100% accurate, but the line number is sometimes off. But whenever it's off, it's not off by much. So in other words, think of this as more of a suggestion, like it's in that zone somewhere. It might be line 16, it might be line 15 or 18, it's in that zone, okay? So for me, I now go to line 16. So yeah, here, just precisely my point, it's actually line 10. So I just close the tag, and then go back to Webpack and make sure it's happy. I'll just run it again, Webpack. There we go. And then make sure you see that, and then we're good to go. Now, if you open up your project directory and double-click the index.html or just run it in Chrome or wherever you do your stuff, you should see that. Okay? Does everyone see that? Anyone here not see that? That means you have a typo in here somewhere. You probably have a lowercase where it should be uppercase.
Good.
Okay. So what we've confirmed is that our environment is now properly set up. So basically we've set up a very simple React project successfully. Now we're ready to actually write some React, to actually build out the project. Okay? So this is how you start a React project, at least as of now. They have tools that make this easier. React, Facebook released a new tool that does all this basically in one line command, one CLI command, but I don't like using that for now. I would later on, but at first it's important to understand the mechanics of everything we just did because you will have to debug with this knowledge. So you don't want to have too much abstraction going on in the beginning. Later on, it's fine just to use a single line tool that just like spits all this out for you. But if you don't understand the underlying pieces and you're using these tools, when things go wrong, you're gonna have a very hard time fixing problems. Question?
It says component is not defined.
Okay, I'm sorry. What?
component is not defined.
A component is not defined. So here, you probably have a typo either on line 1 or line 4.
Uppercase C.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and build out our project. So first thing we're going to do is go back to our terminal. Where am I? Okay, so cd to the src, go to the src directory, make a new directory called components, cd into that. I'm going to create a new component called chat room. So touch chat room like that. That's going to be where all the chat actually takes place. And that's going to be pretty much our entire project. It's going to be just a chat room and that's it. Good? So now go into that file and let's set it up. So we have to import React component from React class chat room extends component export default chat room. This is the chat room component. Okay, so like I was saying earlier, when you create a new component, basically what you're doing is you're defining the HTML that shows up in your component. You're designing the actual visual pieces of your component. So here we created a new component which does nothing more than render this one line of text. And you may notice it's slightly different though. There's no document get by element ID. There's no React DOM because this component will not interface directly with the HTML. The only component that does that is our app.js, and that's it. That's our entry point. Every other component is nested inside of other components. So we're going to take this component and nest it inside the app component. That's how it's going to work. So we don't need the React DOM here because the React DOM is for the connection to the front end. It's like the entry point to the real world. Everything else is just pure React. Okay? So we only need that one entry point. That's done. Everything else is embedded in other components. Let's go back to our app.js. Everyone have this before I navigate away? All right, let's import our component. So remember what I was saying that when you create a component, it's like creating your own HTML tags. That's what we're doing here. So here, let's use our own custom HTML tag called chat room, like that. And that's it. And this one line should render the HTML that we defined inside of chat room, if successful. So there it is right there, right there. Okay, so now we have a component nested inside of another component. So now we're good to go. And this is how most React projects are built out. They just nest components inside of components. There's one entry point that like goes into the entire React project. That's typically how it's done.
That's my question.
Yep.
I have an issue. It says target container is not a DOM element.
I'm sorry?
Target container is not a DOM element.
Container is not it. So
I'm
are you?
coming from invariant.js line 38.
I'm sorry. Which one? The
Invariant.js.
were you seeing this first line at any point?
I didn't see the first line yet.
You never saw the first line at all.
Even after corrected my uppercase C, I didn't just get that.
Okay. Check your Webpack. Go back here and check your Webpack. You probably have an error inside the Webpack somewhere. Like, I'm guessing you don't see these green lines in the bottom.
I see build bundle.js and build bundle map.
Okay, so then there's got to be a typo inside the index HTML, or
Build bundle.js.
all right, take a look. You might want to sit closer to you can't see. So your script is imported in the wrong spot. It has to be in the bottom. No. It has to be in the bottom. Basically, just make sure you follow the code exactly as I write it. Don't try to use your different. Just do it exactly as I write it. I promise you I'll do it. I guarantee it. I've done this thousands of times. It'll. So, I'm sorry, what's your name? Kieran. So what Kieran did was he imported the script tag in the head tag, which you theoretically can do, but here's why it didn't work in this case, because this page loads literally sequentially, in sequence. So what that means is, if the script tag loads here before the div tag, as far as the build is concerned, that div tag doesn't exist. Do you understand? So by putting it beneath the build tag, this JS file now knows that that exists because it literally came before it. Does that make sense? So that's why you're getting that error saying, we can't find what you're looking for. Although you're looking right at it, it's just out of sequence. Okay? Okay, good. So we all have working code? No?
Can you have a quick look?
Yep.
I don't know. So using this,
Chapman, yes, line 3.
go back to the white pad. Yeah, go back to this. Yeah.
Go back to Chapman, yeah. Comma. You don't need that comma.
Thank you.
Mine is already.
What's your
Go to your right one.
Can I just look at it?
Yes.
So you have both of those working back there, you're gonna next list,
We have always done that.
So
No.
that one, JS, build, go back to your HTML page. Do you know how to open up the inspector and see if there's any errors? No. Alright, so right click in the middle of the page, hit inspect.
I'm trying to save my batteries.
Two errors.
Wait, let me see your folder.
Yeah.
It's in here, right?
I don't see the newly component that we created here. So call this.
Okay, so your
This first
it has to be capital C, capital
Yes.
R, so that's the name.
Yeah, I just renamed.
So go back to your webpack.
Oh, probably.
No, it's in the terminal. Go back to the webpack in your terminal. Run it again.
Do I need to run this every time?
No, you shouldn't have to, but I'm just making sure it's still running when reload the page. Okay.
So we're gonna take this.
Because this is dark. Sure. And now I don't know if it fix that up. But it has to be.
Hey Dan, he has an error that says element type is valid.
Sure.
Expected a string and not an object. I don't know where this error is.
Here.
Just hit command tab.
Can you open up your code,
This
please?
is the machine. CD into that folder.
Okay. Were you ever at a point where the initial code was working?
Yeah,
Try to get that to that spot where it was working. And then let's just build it out one step at a time. So
Used to get these classes.
These ones?
Not this time, but
You used to get
this
close.
style.
Yeah,
We have 20 people, everybody's coding. Everybody has a different error.
yeah.
try to get
It's
back
really
to where it was.
demanding.
So go ahead and load that and see if it's working. It's fine. You can just reload the HTML.
The battery in general is pretty good. It's just,
Okay, so there's a problem inside the
I didn't
chat.
charge it all the way up.
This is
What?
the.
You see what I'm doing here? I'm narrowing it down.
Battery is like
So
2 hours and a bit.
go back here to this line.
This will last me a good at least 6-7 hours. If I didn't
Yeah.
the late load.
So there's an error in here.
It's
So
slower, right?
once I remove it, it started working.
This is just lightweight for traveling.
And I can see all that things.
Oh,
These things work.
Oh no, that's not it.
this was only
Look at my line
180, I think.
See that? You don't have that.
It's a Chromebook. I got 180.
So make sure you have line 14.
Yeah, because I was traveling for a little bit. This is fun.
Okay, good. Are we all set? Good? Okay. So we've confirmed that the pieces are working. That's really all we're doing here is making sure all the pieces are working. It's important to understand like this is still just the setup phase. So if you're new to React, what you need to do is go home and literally do this 10 times. Because if you're getting tripped up on this phase, I'm not being critical, we're all new to React and I get it, but what you're trying to need to understand is this is still just the setup phase. So what I do in my courses is I really emphasize the importance of repetition. You really have to do this like 100 times, not once or twice. A lot of people, beginners especially, they have the mentality of like, all right, I got it to work, let's move on to the next thing. Do not do that. It's tempting, I understand that because I used to be that guy, and I still am, but you have to resist that temptation, go back and just do all this again, literally 10 times. Right, until you can get to this point in the process without the minutia being the problem, right? Because right now, if you put a comma here, and that ruins 3 hours of your day debugging, you can't get to the important things, right? So you got to make sure these mistakes aren't getting in your way. So a large part of my teaching philosophy is exactly that. Just now we tear the whole thing down and we build the whole thing up again, and then do it again, and then do it again. You want to make sure that this part of the process isn't the problem, because we need to get onto the more important stuff, which is actually getting the data, persisting the data, updating the code, et cetera, et cetera. That's where the real fun happens, right? So you want to make sure we can get to that point. So anyway, we have our code working. What we want to do now is set up, let's do the visual first. So what I'm going to do is set up an input tag right here, a text field, where the user can type in a message, and then that'll send to the actual server. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. That's literally called an input tag. Input, type, text. Message. Okay, reload that and make sure you see that little input field, and where it says this is the chat room component, we can get rid of that now because it served its purpose. It's basically confirming that we see what we need to see. Okay? And then I'm going to add a small button just saying submit message. Submit message. And for now, this will be our interface, which is obviously not very impressive. We'll make it a little bit better soon, but for now, this is going to be it. And then above this field is going to be the current list of messages. So that's where the actual chat room will be. So above the input field, I'm going to render all the messages as what's called an ordered list. Message 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4. Okay. So for now, our UI is going to look like this. So every time I type in a message here and I press submit, it'll just pop up over here. Okay? And that'll be just a quick, easy way to get something up and running. Okay, good. So let's discuss how the data is stored in a React component. So components have what's called properties and state. And those are the two main places where you can store data. Properties and state. Props and state. We're going to use state today, but that's more of a move of convenience. It should really be in props. The reason I'm not going to do that is because that's going to take the rest of today and setting up the infrastructure for that. The better question is, what's the distinction? Like, when do you use state? When do you use props? So the idea is this. You want to use state when the component is storing information that's only relevant to itself. And you want to use props when the data is assigned to that component from typically another component, what's called a container component. A better way to explain it is this. Any characteristic that you personally have that's assigned to you is a property. So my name, Dan, is a property. It was assigned to me. I didn't pick it, right? My height is a property. It was just assigned to me. However, my mood is a state. I'm deciding my mood. Am I happy? Am I sad? Right? Am I hungry? That's the state. Like, I determine that. Does that make sense? So within the React context, you want to think of it that way. So to make it a little bit more germane to React components, we could say, is this button selected? The button can determine that. The button will say, I am selected. If so, make the background red. If not, make it green, etc. Most typically, the state values are visual values, like highlighted, loading, selected, things of that sort. That's not like a universal truth, but that's what I see most typically. And props are actual properties. So that's an important distinction. So what we're going to do right now is set up the state. And like I said, we're going to use the state to store the chat messages, but that's more of a matter of convenience. This would normally happen in props using what's called Redux. Redux itself is like 3 weeks of class, so I don't want to get into all that today. But this should normally happen through Redux, is my point. So inside the state, we're going to set up a current messages array, which is empty, but let's fill in some dummy messages. First message, second, third. Okay, so you see what I mean by storing data inside the state. Inside the state, we set up an array of JSON objects. Each one just basically one message key, and that's it. And eventually, that will come from our database, the Firebase in this case. But right now, we're using the state to store our initial set of messages. So we're gonna get rid of these right now. Get rid of these guys, and use the state data to render those messages. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. Before we get to that, reload your page, because if you made a mistake, it will show up right now. So reload your page, make sure you still see what we had before. Yep.
Can you see that HTML code for a second?
Sure.
Props is not fun.
Probably a typo. You probably have prop or a typo in constructor.
You just have to put as Y as both and super names.
I think I'm going to start start teaching here from now on. I like this room a lot. This is the first time I've used this room. So I usually use the room on 15th floor because the bathrooms are open there. You don't need a card, but this is a much nicer room. Okay, so let's render these messages instead. So let's go ahead and do that. So over here above the return, what we want to do is we want to run a loop. Let's call it current messages. This state messages. That. So here on line 17, we're looping through the messages array inside the state, and we're returning a list item for each one, where the message itself is being passed into the map function, and we're rendering the text of the message inside the list item. And that will concatenate the variable current message into all three list items, or however many messages you have. So the current messages variable will be list item elements for all three. And then we want to take that variable, of course, and render that instead of the hard-coded messages inside of our original rendering. So it should look like that. Now we have our new messages. Okay, so we're setting things up visually. We're kind of setting it up, right? Making sure everything looks right and adding some basic functionality. And once we do, we'll connect it to Firebase. So the next thing we need to do is add the ability to actually enter a new message, right? So when I type in something here and I press submit, I want to see it pop up here. Okay, that's the next objective. But before we get to that, does anyone have any problems with this? Okay, yeah, take your time. Just make sure you have these 4 or 5 lines and make sure you're seeing what I see here. And then we'll move on to the next part. So right away you can see React is not a beginner level tool, right? I want to be very clear about that inside the workshop introduction. However, if you're new to React and programming in general, for example, who here works professionally as a developer? Okay, so that's good. If you're not a professional, and you're learning this, understand that it's equally hard for everyone else, right? I've been teaching this now for about 7 months. I've done 4 Node and React classes now. This is hard. React is hard. That's good news for you though, because if you're going into software and people are trying to learn React, everyone else is struggling too. So if you can push through that, you're in a much smaller labor pool. What matters is that React is also highly in demand. There's no doubt about this. My courses where I teach Node and React, about 1 in 3 are employees of other companies whose companies pay them to take my class. So the companies pay me to teach their employees Node and React. In other words, Node and React is so high in demand right now that companies are having a hard time filling these spots. So they're just training their own employees, and I happen to be the beneficiary of some of that. Right? So what that means is that the demand is so high and the labor pool is so low, and that's not going to change anytime very soon because React is not easy, as you can see, right? So if you're a beginner and you're entry level and you have proficiency in Node and React, you immediately distinguish yourself, immediately, as opposed to say Ruby on Rails. Because how many boot camps teach Ruby on Rails? Almost every boot camp in New York City teaches Ruby on Rails. It's also very easy. Like learning Rails is pretty quick. Are we all good? We're all set to go? Okay, so keep that in mind. That's very important. It's also why I taught myself Node and React almost a year ago. Around Thanksgiving last year is when I started working on all this stuff. Because I read the tea leaves and I was like, okay, this is clearly where everything's headed. If I want to stay relevant, just like I did in 2010, I picked iOS for a reason, right? There's a reason I picked Objective-C. It wasn't just an arbitrary decision. It was based on pure economics. I was an econ major. So I just read the supply and demand and said, okay, if I want a spot in this economy, I have to be in that zone, right? Well, today I would do the same analysis, but the conclusion would be different. Node and React is where you want to be. And luckily, React is hard. That's a good thing. So focus on that, get past the difficulties, and then you'll immediately distinguish yourself, okay? Anyway, let's get back to this. So now let's set up the functionality where the user can type stuff in, press submit, and then just pop in the new message. Just go ahead and do that. So here, inside the input, I'm going to bind a function to the onChange. I kind of skipped a step here, but just follow along with me real quick. So here in the onChange attribute, we're binding a function that will be called every time the user types a letter into the field. However, that function doesn't exist yet. That's what I meant by skip the step. So let me go ahead and set that up. So go up to the constructor and declare the function. I'm not going to explain the concept behind this because it's a little confusing, but it has something to do with what's called context. And then here we're implementing the function. Okay, so assuming everything worked, when I reload the page and I start typing letters in here, I should see that pop up. To open up this console, you do Option Command I. Okay, you hold all three buttons down. Option Command I. That'll open up this console, and then when you type in letters, you should see this pop up. Okay, so now we're capturing the user activity. Okay, that's good. But let's take it one step further. Let's actually capture the text that the user typed in so we can actually capture the next message. So what we're going to do, but before I continue, does everyone see this? Yep. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new property inside the state. I shouldn't use the word property because that's a whole separate concept. We're going to create a new data. We're going to create new data inside the state called message. And every time the user types into the input field, it'll update that message text. Okay, so we'll see that right now. So here we're going to create a new key. Yep. Called message.
Property of bind of undefined.
You probably forgot. This is probably not exactly the same in your code as it is in mine.
It's after the super. Start of create message. Start of message. Bind.
So what we're going to do is every time the user types in stuff in here, that's going to update this message key right here, every time, so that we always have a reference to it. Now this is truly a situation where you want to use state. Line 9, this is important to understand. Line 9, this is the appropriate usage of state, because in this component, only this component cares about the next message. Right? It only relates to itself. So, yeah, we'll leave it at that for now. I don't want to get too much into state and props. So here, inside the update message, oops, typo, value, target, value. Honestly, I should have just had it done this the first time. You see where it says event target value? Think of the event as where the function is coming from. Okay, that's actually target, but for now that's good enough. And then the value is exactly what it sounds like. So if I reload the page and I start typing it in, now I see the function call with the text. Okay, so we are now capturing the text. Did you fix the mistake? Okay, what was it?
There's a typo in onChange.
Okay, yeah, typical, yeah, typos. All right, so here we are now capturing the text. Now let's bind that to the state every single time. So here we do this set state message. Like that. So now every single time the user types a letter inside the input field, the state is being updated with the new message value. So we're always tracking it. We always have the next message sort of lined up. Okay. Like it's ready to go all the time. So next thing we want to do is create a new function for the button. We're going to call that submit message. Okay, so let's do it in the right order this time. So this submit message. So here I'm creating a function that will be called by the button. Submit message. This state message. Okay, this time I did it in the right order. I create the function first, then I'm going to bind it to the button. So last time I kind of did it in reverse. So on click. There we go. So now you see on the button how I bind the function that we just wrote to that button's onClick attribute, which is exactly what it sounds like. When you click the button, it's going to call that function. Okay, so when I reload the page, I'm going to write a message. This is a test message. And then when I hit the submit button, right there, I should see the actual text from the input field. That means we're capturing the updated message. That means it was successful. We're capturing the data. Good? So one thing, I'm going to wrap this text real quick. So one thing about components that's a little bit different from my original explanation. So originally the way I explained components is that it's basically custom HTML tags, which is true, but it's custom HTML tags with more stuff, like functions. So we're writing functions inside of our components now. So it's like smart HTML tags. HTML tags that can do stuff. That's essentially it. And that's what we're doing right here. We're binding functions and then using them down here. Okay, and you can do stuff and store values, store data. So components are kind of like objects in object-oriented programming. You can store data as properties, and you can write functions. These are objects in object-oriented programming. Oop. How are we doing so far? Everyone got it working? Good? Okay, so now we have our ability to track the message. So now the next thing we want to do is take the message here and then pop it into there. Okay, so what we do is, let's see, var list equals object. So this state messages. Yep, messages list. I kind of skipped a step here. I'm going to do next message. ID equals this state messages of text equals this state message. So on line 28, what I'm doing, 28, 29, 30, what I'm doing is I'm preparing the next message JSON object. If you look closely, you'll see that the JSON object here has the properties that you see up here, right? The ID and the text. So we're just preparing it in the same fashion, so the data is consistent. You guys see what we're doing there? ID and text. Okay, and notice that the ID is just an incrementation of the message. It's just the next number, like number 5, number 6, number 7, etc. Okay, so that's our next message. So now let's go ahead and pop that into the actual array. And this should accomplish the objective, assuming there's no mistakes. So I'll explain real quick how this works after I confirm that it does in fact work. I might have made a mistake. So let's go ahead and test it. Next message, and then just like that. Okay, does everyone see that happening, that behavior? Okay, if not, go back and double check your code, make sure you see that. So far today, this is the most important code we've written. These 5 or 6 lines right here. Let me explain why. Here's the first part of the React we've done so far that's doing what React is meant to do. It reacts to changes. So what that means is this. Whenever there's a state change in a component, whenever the component changes state, which is happening right here, we're changing the state, React re-renders that component. It basically reloads that one component. And anytime that happens, it takes the new data and renders that new data. So whenever you call setState ever, you're basically calling reload. Think of the word setState as reload. And that's pretty much accurate in React world. Okay? So by calling setState here, we're saying please reload this component with this new data. And that's why we see that over here. And so the reason it's called React is because it essentially reacts to state changes. Every time the state changes, it reacts, it updates again, re-renders. It calls all of this again. Okay? And that's the fundamental premise of React. This is why React is so fast, because it doesn't reload the entire DOM. It only reloads that one component. And not even the component, only the sub-portions of the component that matter. So here's what I'm saying. This is 4 li tags. Originally it was 3. If I just do 3, if I reload, you'll see 3, right? When I type in 4th message, and I press submit, right here, it doesn't reload the entire component. It only reloads the pieces inside that need to be reloaded. So in this case, it's only going to be 1 li tag and that's it, which makes this crazy fast. This is a huge distinction between Angular 1. Angular 1 doesn't do it this way. Angular 1 would reload the entire thing. And so it becomes very slow when you have lots of data. It gets noticeably slower. Whereas in React, it only reloads the pieces that you have to reload. Does that make sense? So if you ever go on Facebook, which uses React because they invented React, you'll see that when I load my Facebook page, you'll see different pieces pop in at different points in time. Right? So here, well, that was a little bit too fast, but when I reload the Facebook page, it doesn't all reload at the same time. Like different pieces pop in at different spots. That's because they're all reacting to different changes of state. That's why it doesn't all show up at once. Okay? So that's React like literally doing what I just described, like different pieces popped in. Okay? Okay, does everyone have this behavior reflected? All right, so let's go ahead. So now we have our pseudo chat room set up, right? Obviously it's not real because I can't chat with you and vice versa, but purely locally this is now properly set up. So our functionality is ready to go. So now we're ready to swing over to Firebase, set up a database on the Firebase backend to store all of these, and then we're going to render whatever's on Firebase as opposed to what's locally in state. So what that means is, let's go back to our component here and get rid of these dummy messages. They've served their purpose, right? We've confirmed that this works, so we can get rid of these now. Right, so that's done. And if we reload the page, we're back to empty messages. So we're good on that. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go to Firebase. You don't have to do this. In fact, you shouldn't, because I want all of us to use the same Firebase console, same Firebase project, so we're all chatting in the same chat room. Otherwise, we can't really confirm that it works, right? But watch what I do, so that you can, when you go home, you can do this on your own. So it's not really that hard, actually. So here, this is Firebase on Google. So I go to my console. Obviously, you sign up first, and then go to your console. I'm going to take this project down. Because I want to reuse the same name. So. Okay, so I'm in my Firebase console now. I'm going to create a new project. Okay, I'm going to call it Chat Demo. So it's creating my new project. Now here I am inside my new project. There's one configuration thing you have to do, which is right here in Database and Rules. And you see where it says auth does not equal null? You want to switch both of these to equal, like that. I'm not going to really get into why, but just do that. The bottom line is, by doing this, you make it open access. Anyone could chat in this room. Okay. So publish that. So that's done. Then you go back to Chat Demo, like the name of this guy right here. Click on this guy right here. Add Firebase to your web app, and it'll give you some JavaScript code that you can just dump into your project to connect it to your Firebase, your React project. And so we take this, and we just go back to our index.html, and we paste it above the bundle, like that. And now we have a reference to our Firebase module where we can connect to Firebase. Okay? So I'm going to email this to all of you so that we're all connecting to the same Firebase backend, so we're all chatting with one another. Very important to understand. Otherwise, we're not really chatting, right? So let me do that. Okay, I think the best way to do this now, emails. So what's your email?
Hart, H-A-R-T, at Leaping Fish.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, I had everyone in the meetup. Let's just do it that way, because I don't want to take any chances on this. So
You just drop it out at the bottom of
right there. Oh yeah, I can do. No, I don't want to paste all that into the. Just do it like that. Okay, because it's a lot of JavaScript code. It's going to be hard to. Okay. Your name is
Sam.
Sam. Okay. Kieran. Okay. Oh, you're at NYU? Cool.
It's going to show FH.
And you are?
Let's do QQAN@outlook.com.
QQAN@outlook.com. And your height? Gotcha. Okay, Firebase, and then I'm just going to literally copy and paste the JavaScript code into here. And then you guys do the same. Take all that and put it inside your index.html. Make sure it's above the bundle, though. Okay? Otherwise, it won't work. So while you're doing that, let me explain how Firebase organizes its data. Firebase basically just gives you one big JSON object where you can create as many sub-JSON objects as you want. And anyone who's connected to your Firebase backend will receive update notifications every time there's any change from any connected client. So in other words, Heidi, if you post a message, I will hear about it. So will everyone else in the room, as long as we're all connected and vice versa. Okay? That's the magic of Firebase. That's what Firebase is designed to do. Firebase isn't the only option. We could also use what's called Socket.io. We could use Meteor. They're all perfectly good. I'll probably do another demo at some point doing this in Socket.io. The distinction is that Socket.io is not a service; it's a library. So you can run Socket.io on your own system. You don't have to sign up for anything. It's a library, so that's pretty cool. But that comes with it a lot of like other headaches. Firebase abstracts away a lot of headaches. Yeah.
Quick question. So Firebase, where is it available? Is it available in China? Is it available?
Yeah, it's a service. It's like Gmail.
Yeah, I know, but let's say Facebook authentication is also a service, or Twitter authentication. It's not available in China.
Oh, I don't know about other countries, and I can't speak on that. Okay, so did everyone copy and paste their code? Good? All right, where were we? So let's go back to chatroom.js, and what we want to do is when the component loads, we now want to connect to our Firebase console. So what we do is component did mount. Okay, so this function right here is what's called the lifecycle method. And what that means is this is a function that will be called by the system, not by the user. Okay, what that means is whenever this component simply shows up, this function will be called. And we can very clearly just confirm that just by doing a console log, which is a good idea because we want to make sure it works. So here, when I reload the page, you want to make sure you see that right there, okay? And what's important to understand is that we didn't call it, the system called it. It just automatically happens. And we're choosing to we'll do what's called overriding it. We're going to override that to do our own implementation, okay? So if you don't see that, nothing's going to work. So make sure you see this. So usually it's a typo. You might have a capital C right here.
Yeah.
You see how much I've been teaching lately? I just know that's probably here or there. Okay, so we have our override successfully showing up. So here's where we connect to Firebase. So basically what we're saying is as soon as this page shows up, connect to Firebase. So Firebase. Okay, so if you're new to Firebase, this is certainly not easy to understand at first, but get it all written down, and then I'll explain what's going on when we confirm that the code is accurate. Who here has done jQuery in the past? Good. This looks a little bit like jQuery, where we're binding a callback listener on a certain event. In this case, the value is the event, or basically what we're saying is whenever the value changes, please run this callback function. So in jQuery, it's very similar. Like when you bind a function to like a button or like an input, we say .on, and then we pass in a function. Every time something changes, that function gets called. That's essentially what's going on here as well. Okay, so if you have jQuery experience, it's a similar concept. Okay, so what we want to do, I'm just going to reload the page to make sure there's no error. If I made a mistake, errors will show up. So first things first, on line 17, we're connecting to our Firebase backend. Okay, and you see where it says ref messages. Well, if you look at my Firebase console, right here on the database, this is my Firebase backend, which is one big JSON object. Well, right now it's very small because it's empty. So it's an empty JSON object. And what I'm saying is, go into that JSON object in line 17 and find the messages key. And whenever that messages key changes in any way whatsoever, please run this callback function. Okay, that's the callback to listener. Okay, that's essentially what's taking place right here. And the snapshot is Firebase's terminology. It's Firebase's object for the current value of that key at any given point in time. So whenever anyone in the room updates that value, we will all get that snapshot back in this function. Okay? This function does not get called once. This is a common misconception. We bind it on the component did mount, but it gets called every time there's a change on the back end. This function is just on standby. Okay? So what we want to do right now is test it by going to submit message here. Now, if you notice in submit message, we take the new message here, next message, and then we push it into state. We no longer want to do this. We want Firebase to handle all this. We want to push this to Firebase, not to state. So I'm going to comment all this out. Right? We don't want that anymore. Comment it out. We want to send this next message to our Firebase backend. That's the goal. So what I'm going to do now is reconnect to Firebase database.ref messages plus next message ID set next message. So what I'm saying in line 43 is when we submit the next message, reconnect to Firebase, find that messages key again, add another key inside, and set that our next message as the value for the subindex, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Now what's cool about Firebase, it's nice, is that even if this adder key doesn't exist, it'll create it for us recursively. So we're creating two keys here. We're creating the messages key as well as the index key. And Firebase will do both for us on our behalf, which is nice. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to check for it. In a more typical scenario, you'd have to check for it. But if it's already there, it won't write over it. It'll just use the same one. So here, don't test it. Just watch me first. So here, if I reload the page, I do first message, right, and press submit. There it is. But more importantly, look at my Firebase console. I now have a messages key. I have a 0 index, and I have ID 0 first message. You guys see that? Much more importantly, it also showed up over here because of the function bind, the callback function I binded over here. Now, if you guys wrote your code accurately, you should actually see first message on your page as well. Who here sees that? That's from me. That means your code worked. So if you see this, who here sees that? Anyone who sees it, type in a message into your box saying hello from and then your name so I know who it's coming from. Okay, but I'm not seeing. There it is. Hello from Heidi. There you go. So yours worked.
Showing up on my screen.
Hello from Felice. So you're still binding to state, Karen. So here, something in your code is off in this spot. Okay, even though it's showing up on yours, the key is it's not showing up on mine or anyone else's. Remember, this is a chat room, right? So the fact that it's showing up on yours really isn't the objective. It has to show up on, the objective is that everyone else sees it, right? So if it's only showing up on yours, but not anyone else's, that means you're binding it to state in all likelihood.
I had to refresh my page.
I commented out all the list and I just shared it.
This should go back. If you go to your terminal.
Hello from. There you go. Did everyone see this last one? That's from me.
So it looks like you have this little extra closing brackets.
A, B, C, D. Who did that? Cool. We're good now.
I didn't change anything myself.
Yes, it's back.
Go ahead.
Refresh my page.
So instead of writing what you want, move the argument to the report.
Cool. So that's it now. So what I want you to try right now is, let's see here. Let's think of the best way to do this. So we have 2, 2, and 2, right? So let's pair off like 2, 2, and 2. I want everyone to create their own Firebase project in pairs. So you guys create one Firebase project, you guys create one, and you guys create one. You chat with each other. Does that make sense? That's the objective right now. Okay?
We just do the whole same thing.
Not the whole thing. Just create your own Firebase backend, so that I don't have to. You don't have to like rely on mine. That's the only part of the tutorial we didn't do yet. Is create your own Firebase backend.
So I can create a project. If you're trying